What to do when you ask for help and people don't help you. Today we're going to talk about just that. Things that you can do when people just tell you no. You're not alone in this, and it's super frustrating. I'm sure there's been a couple times in your life where you've absolutely needed help, and I'm talking about really desperately needed help. I don't know, like you've had $0 in the bank account, or you've been evicted and maybe you've had to sleep on a couch somewhere. Maybe you just lost your job and you didn't have a financial cushion. So in those moments, you feel like the world has gone to. So today we're going to talk about just that. And I'm actually Alice, a communications coach who has had moments in her life, believe it or not, when I asked for help and people did not want to help me. And I remember a distinct moment when I asked a friend for $100 and she asked me, what do you need it for? I've even asked another friend for $1,000 and he made me feel really shitty because he basically said, like, make sure to use it for something important, and why isn't your family helping you? And it's like, how do I explain to someone, lost a client or a job and I don't have enough for rent? How do you do that? Like, it's super humiliating, number one. And at the end of the day, most of us don't even want to ask for help because we're afraid of rejection. And especially if you fear abandonment or fear rejection, it's so debilitating. So today we're going to talk about why people have a hard time helping others and why it feels like impossible to get help, and ways that you can increase your chances of getting help when you absolutely need it without feeling ashamed. Because that's another big thing, is that people are afraid when they ask for help that they will be shamed or rejected. And I think it doesn't have to be that way if you're smart about asking how someone can help. So let's get started. But before I get into all of that, I want to talk about the frustration you feel, and I want to make sure I acknowledge that. I'm actually just sitting in my bedroom and hanging out on the floor. I think I wanted to be comfortable for this video. It's always interesting how we think about things and put things in perspective. The frustration actually is two-sided. So the frustration the person feels that's asking for help, and the frustration the other person feels who's receiving this information and who's in the position to either help or not. And let me give you an idea. Let's say you need to borrow money. You ask someone, can I borrow $1,000? I'm going to pay you back. Maybe I'll give you 10% interest on that loan. That person tells you no. So right now you are feeling frustrated. And of course, you're going to feel frustrated. And the other person also feels frustrated that A, you asked them for help, or B, that they can't help you or don't want to help you and they have to tell you. And it's so like, I remember just like really being down on myself when I heard that no. And especially when you have to explain yourself, like, hey, I need this to pay rent. And then the person you know is looking at you really bad, because guess what? That person's not going to help you unless they have been through it. So a lot of the times people want to help you when they've been through the situation, because right now the person that has never had to borrow $1,000 to pay rent or whatever to pay their employees isn't going to understand. The frustration is really important to acknowledge and understand that it's only an emotion, and just because that person hasn't helped you doesn't mean that the next person won't help you. And you must be okay with that. Like, you must be okay with asking another person for help and they might say no. I remember like even asking for $500 donation for one of my creative projects, and I think I sent out an email to like 100 people and nobody donated $500. So its donation is different from a loan. A donation is somebody's willing to give you money out of goodwill, and then a loan is somebody's going to lend you the money expecting it back. The next thing I'm going to talk about is like why people don't always help and why they're not in the position. A lot of the times I've heard like, hey, I don't lend money to a friend because if that person doesn't give me the money back, I don't want our relationship to be damaged. And I totally understand that. But I also think that here's an opportunity that, let's say there's a negotiations phase. So let's say that person doesn't want to lend you $1,000 and they could be in the position to say, hey, is $100 okay? I know it's not $1,000, but this is all I have. And I think that's a healthy approach versus no to $1,000. And for you, you feel like, oh, okay, at least I got something. So I think this is a really good middle ground where both parties can actually feel like they could help, and instead of like feeling the frustration and the inability to help, because the help might be the big ask is $1,000, but maybe the smaller ask is $100. So when you're actually asking for help, maybe lowering your expectations and providing a lower amount so you could reduce those chances of frustration and maybe the risk of someone saying no. And I think that's really important. It's just like to set the expectations accurately. I think it's okay to say, I can't help you right now with $1,000, but don't be afraid to ask me in the future for that money, or I wish I could help, but I'm really struggling with these series of payments. And I think like if both people are very authentic and just being honest about it, but the problem is that we're very much like, we have weird emotions around money. Either if we have it, we feel guilty if we have it, or if we don't have the money, then we're feeling guilty about not having money, feeling like losers. And or we just feel okay with not having the money, but somebody else makes us feel like losers. So it's kind of like in whichever way you swing, having money or no money, having a lot of money or not enough money, there's always that guilt or shame or frustration, and there's always that strong emotion tied to it. And here's what you can do. When you ask for help, you don't have to disclose all the information and being specific, but disclosing enough to kind of make that person feel like their help is being valued or it's going a long way. Because that person could think, hey, that person, you want to borrow $1,000 to go shopping versus paying the rent. If you say, hey, can I borrow $1,000 or whatever you can provide, it would help me a lot right now. I just have some bills coming up. How about we sign a contract for 3 months and I'm going to return the money, or 6 months, because this way you're creating a sense of like security and responsibility with the money that you're going to be lended. It's really interesting that when you take that responsibility, the results that you get. And I remember one of my friends, I said like, hey, can I borrow $3,000 and I will pay you back in 6 months? And he even said, okay, can I put 10% interest on that? And I was like, 10% interest on the whole contract, 3 years. So that's 10% on 3,000, or it's going to be accrued each month, right? Is it compound interest? It was interesting. Just make sure to specify and clarify what the person's talking about. Instead of like trying to borrow the $1,000, become creative in like how you can generate $1,000. So I actually have an example. A friend of mine was looking for a editor, and I did some editing work on her book. It's called Emotionally Healing Through Art and Meditation, The Colorful Secret of Creating Inner Strength. And I thought to myself, okay, instead of just borrowing $1,000, let me go ahead and see if I could do some side hustle or side gigs and help my friends out, maybe get hired as a writer. So you can always get creative, and it's important. This is a big one that was really hard for me to understand, is managing expectations. And I always thought that if I'm someone willing to help, that other people will be willing to help me. And this was a really big mistake, because I tend to be an optimist and I tend to help people. I'm also an empath, but not everybody who are in the position or not in the position to help will actually help you. And I had to understand that I'm not going to be in the position of like begging people, but I also don't want to hate them for not helping me. And I'm just taking it as it is. And it empowered me to get creative and trying to help myself. Like I said, well, am I actually helpless? Like, do I actually need the $1,000 right this minute? Or can it wait? Do I actually need to pay the bill right now? Can I call the company and say, hey, can you give me a 30-day grace period? Can you extend the deadline on this payment? So when you actually are solving your own problems and thinking about creatively how to help yourself, you're almost empowered. And I think it's important, because sometimes like when you're asking for help and you're going through your book of contacts and then you're getting no, you're really down on yourself and your self-esteem is pretty low. And you're just like, oh my God, what am I doing? Now I'm embarrassed because not only did I not get the money, but now actually people think I'm a loser. I got a couple more minutes here. I'm going to tell you how I actually am able to get help creatively without kind of feeling bad about myself. And this actually works. So stick with me a couple minutes. Let's actually go ahead and discuss one more important thing about asking for help. I suggest that when you ask for help, to first focus on your mindset and really be in the strong position. Honestly ask for help in a direct way without giving so much of a sob story, without getting so emotional. When you come from a position of empowerment, whatever the outcome is, just you control that energy, you control that mindset, you control the way that you communicate. And if you actually do it correctly in a very authentic way, ask for help, you might increase your chances of getting that help. At the end of the day, it's going to happen no matter what. There's going to be a moment in your life where you're going to have to ask for help. And majority of the time, actually, you won't get it. And you don't have to hate people for it. The best way that I have done it, and I promised you I would tell you this, is barter. And barter is just exchange of services. I offered to, for example, when I needed $1,000, I offered to babysit. I offered to do like a free marketing campaign. I offered to ghostwrite articles. And I said, hey, I know I need this $1,000 and it's going to take me a while to pay it back. Maybe I can barter some of my services. So maybe I could only pay you half, and then the other half I can pay you with my time or providing my services. And it has actually worked. Sometimes asking for help around your birthday is great, because then people are like, you know what, just that's your birthday present. Don't worry about it. And also recently, like I've had a friend and he was looking at me. He saw how much work I put in, and I owed my friend like $50, and I told him about it, and he's just like, we'll pay her the $50. And then I was like, oh, we'll pay. I think he meant that he's going to help me pay her back $50. And actually what ended up happening is he gave me 100. So that was like, that's a present. So like, don't worry about it. Even though I needed more money, but that amount was just a wonderful gesture. And it's also being in gratitude when you do get the help, and making sure to honor that person, even if they could just give you $20 or $100, because they could have given you zero. So let's wrap this up. When you ask for help and you don't get it, what do? Well, you maintain your grace, you maintain your confidence, you have a good head on your shoulders, you come up with creative ways to ask for help, you're managing your expectations, you're offering your services in the way of a barter, and at the end of the day, really just continue asking for help. Go through a couple of people that you know, family and friends and strangers. And at the end of the day, strangers might end up helping you more, and that's okay. And just being kind to yourself and knowing that it's okay. I'm curious. So in your experience, how have you asked for help, and how have you actually managed to get the help? And I think like if we talk about this in this community and on this channel, like we can come up with pretty cool ways to get help. And I think that's important to help each other out with this. And I'm actually going to publish in the community tab some of your responses, so please make sure to comment. I would love to hear from you. So in the next video, since we're on this topic of asking for help, I will cover how to ask your colleagues for help. And this is a big one because the stakes are even higher. Asking your friends and strangers and family for help is not as difficult as asking your colleagues for help. And maybe I'm wrong in that, but in my experience, everybody's trying to protect their job. And sometimes like asking colleagues for help, you're afraid of losing your job, and you don't want your boss to find out that you're in this sticky situation, because at work, some people could use it against you and then you could lose your job. So at the end of the day, if you ask your family and strangers, friends for help, you just feel ashamed. But at your work, the stakes are higher in the sense that you might actually lose your job. This is a very sensitive topic, and I'm going to cover that in the next episode. And I greatly appreciate you for tuning in today. And of course, always watching these videos, giving me a thumbs up and hitting that subscribe button. Thank you so much. And as always, do the best that you can every day.